I put up a poll question on Twitter, and you guys, it's still up there. It's still active. You guys can vote on it. And the simple question was, what's the biggest reason the Seahawks are not in the playoffs? And just for everybody's information out there, it only allows you 4 options. Okay, so I got a bunch of people go, how come you didn't put this? How come you didn't put that? I'm like, it only gives me 4. I don't control it. I'm sorry. So that was, and I said, these are the most popular criticisms of this team. What is the biggest reason the Seahawks missed the playoffs? Bad O-line, poor play calling, and then I wrote Geno/turnovers, or they're just not that good yet. Those are the 4 options I put. And then people put others. I would tell you the most popular addition was John Schneider. He took a beating from those responding on Twitter. They're mad about off-season acquisition. We can get into all that. But you guys can still vote on that. And right now, Bad O-line is running away with it with over 2,600 votes. But if you're on Twitter, at Bob Stelton on Twitter, you can cast your vote there. We'll take your calls. You guys can text in. But that's that was the reaction. Right now, Bad O-line has 61.3%. Second is they're just not that good yet at 14.8%. Geno/turnovers is third at 13.3%, and then poor play calling, 10.7%. That's the least. And tons of comments on there. But if you're voting on this, Dave, what do you point to?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I am a huge just turnover in general person. And I think, and when you go back and look at, and I've said this before, you look at New England and Bill Belichick, you look at Pete Carroll and his run, you look at Andy Reid at Kansas City, and you go and check versus the turnover ratio, the turnover battle, and it's amazing. It's especially not giving up the ball. That's that side of it. I mean, it's not so much about taking it away; it's more about keeping it. Mm-hmm. And that probably to me is the biggest one. But I mean, you could make a case for a lot of. Here's why I don't just throw bad O-line in there. O-line is everybody complains about their offensive line. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do think that offensive, from talking to Ray Roberts and Mark Schlereth and and who was the other guy we said we asked him about it, and he said I think it was Mike Tice. He said he thinks it's the coaching, that it's just bad in the NFL. But we hear that all the time, and so to me, I don't. Now you could go back and go, well, look, Dave, you were down to your right. Your right tackle was down to 4th string. Mm-hmm. You had a guy in there you didn't even plan on touching. I mean, Michael Jarrell was going to be a project, and he's out there playing, actually. Not for very long, but you had Stone Forsythe, you had Abe Lucas. When Abe Lucas came back, it was great, but then he kind of, fell off a little bit, and, and then you have your right guard where there was, 3 different guys. You had a center that retired, and then we went back to Olu. I mean, it was pretty bad, but I just feel like there's most of the teams in the NFL have a problem with that. Poor play calling. I guess the only time I've ever complained about the play calling, and this is where everybody said the Giant game. Going back to the Giant game. To me, I would go back to that Rams game. You had a chance to take them. They end up beating us in overtime. And that 3rd and 4th down where they got stuffed on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 because they brought everybody in the box and they just beat us at the point of attack. That was my one complaint as far as play calling was, why not spread it out and just let, because the previous 4 or 5 plays, Ken Walker had run for 3, 4, 6, and it was spread out normal formations. Then we bunch it up, and we can't get anywhere. So, yeah, that part bothered me a little bit. Another one I would throw in there is the inside linebacker situation. It took them a long time to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something that, was probably – well, they obviously put their money in D-line, but that was something that, took them a while to get going, and that's a very important part of that defense. That's when they started to click. That's when the defense started playing consistently well, is when they got the 2 inside back. But you had to go through Jerome Baker, who you ended up trading, and then Dodson you just cut. I saw him get a pick over the weekend, by the way.
He's had 2 since he's been there.
Yeah, so And he was like, hey, I made 70 tackles. I don't know what the deal was, but it just wasn't working. It wasn't working there. So, yeah, I could throw that in there too, but I'm going to go with the 14%er here. They're just not that good yet.
Yeah, and just even back to that Ram game, would you have 2 interceptions in the red zone in that game? Geno had 3 on the day.
There was one that got returned for like 103 yards.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things within that game you could point to. He also had 3 touchdowns, threw for 363 yards, but you threw 3 picks in that game, and they were costly. So, yeah, you could point to those 3rd down, 4th down plays. You can point to the pick. I mean, there's a lot of reasons within that game.
Well, the only reason I'm calling those out is because that's really the only time I've judged anybody for play calling. To me, like, every play should work if everybody is executing and everybody does their job and everything. So I'm not one to do that typically, but that was one where I was pretty adamant about that bothered me.
Again, you're looking at a potential to have a better record than you had last year if they win this final game.
Right.
You've matched last year at minimum. So you didn't really take that step back. If you want to look at how they ranked in categories, they're actually a better defensive team than they were last year. They were dreadful last year. Dreadful. So you look at that and you go, well, offensively you took a step back. Certainly your quarterback took a step back in touchdown to interception ratio, things. So that all sort of evens it out. Yeah, the defense stepped up a bit in terms of rankings. Offense took a bit of a step back. So you're kind of in the same spot you were last year in terms of where they are. You're a 9-win team, hopefully a 10-win team when it's all said and done. But so how big of an impact was the new coaching staff in totality if they're essentially where they were last year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. And really, I think the biggest question there is probably, with Ryan Grubb. And look, that's why he gets paid the big bucks, right? I mean, it's pretty much on the offensive coordinator, especially when you have a defensive-minded coach. It's not like, and I think Mike Macdonald is directing him, kind of, giving him guardrails or whatever, but not calling the plays and things like that. So, and I understand that will, I always tend to go back to, okay, what are we doing on the field? Are we executing what Ryan Grubb is putting in there? And, we saw a couple of times, like the game down in Arizona, I was very impressed by that. That was pretty amazing after coming back from a couple of, games where they just couldn't really move the ball. And they did a really good job. There were some flashes there, but for the most part, that was, that's why I see why people are like, okay, poor play calling, 11%. I think offensive line has just become the one kind of dump off point for pretty much everybody. What do you think about they're just not that good enough yet?
Well, but the record says they're as good as they were last year. Did we feel like they were good? They're mediocre? I think part of that is, they're not where they're going to be.
Let me ask it again, Bob. They're not that good yet. Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. And we got a chance to win 10 games here. And so, yeah, I mean, there's some things to like. But look, there's going to be disappointment. There's no question about it. But, I don't know. It was kind of interesting to see how this year went and kind of figuring out Mike Macdonald and who he is. Same thing with Grubb and the other coaches. And, it'll be a really interesting offseason, I think, because here's the thing, as much as I said, well, we didn't have the inside backer situation taken care of and everything. Mike Macdonald's not going to sit on his hands. He's going to get things done. He traded a guy. He cut a guy. Those were your 2 stars that were supposed to be like the guys that were going to run your defense. And he just got rid of them. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be an aggressive offseason as far as that goes, fixing this problem. And we'll see what, I know everybody's going to be looking at offensive line, that's for sure.